Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different ideas and techniques to help you create a happier lifestyle. And today we're going to talk about menopause, hormones, and all those fun things. And I've got Cindy Dupuis, who's a functional medicine nutritionist and a menopause coach with over 20 years in private practice. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Denise. It's really nice to be here.
Now, what inspired you to do this type of work?
Well, the inspiration probably was seeded in my early 20s, so that was a long time ago. So I've always been fascinated by the human body, how it works. And I actually started off going to school, kind of going to physical therapy, and then I switched gears halfway through and got my degree in dietetics and food administration. And then I didn't do anything with it. I got married, had kids, was working for my then husband, who owned a used car dealership. So that was quite a departure from where I had started. And then in my early 40s, I was 43 and I was going through a divorce, and it was a very stressful, upheaval time in my life. And I kind of thought, I'm kind of starting over here in a lot of ways, and I still love the human body. And I thought, what can I do with nutrition? Where do I go with this? And I happened to go to a lecture by a nutritionist, and she held up Dr. Mark Hyman's book, The Ultimate Metabolism. And if you don't know who Mark Hyman is, he's probably one of the original founders of the Institute of Functional Medicine. So he's been around for a while in that space. And I got his book and I started to read it, and I went, oh my gosh, this just makes so much sense to me, just connecting all the dots and how our bodies are not siloed, everything works together. So I got very excited and inspired with that. And at the same time, going through all this, I had started yoga about a year prior to my upheaval. And I felt that the yoga kind of got me through, was one of the things that got me through my divorce. And I wanted to pay it forward. And I felt it was such an integral part of my healing that I became a yoga instructor. Loved doing that. I'm still teaching yoga 20 plus years later, 23 years later. And through that, my yoga students started to come to me and I started to help them with nutrition, right? And I had a pretty good base. And at the same time, I was going through a really hard time physically. And part of that was my digestive system just decided to stop and not work anymore. And I also threw myself into menopause. I was 43, so it's early. Usually the average age is around 51 or so. And my body was menstruating 1 month, and then the next month it just stopped. And I didn't think a whole lot about it. I thought, okay, here it is. And we really didn't talk about perimenopause and menopause back then. It's just okay. And I didn't have all the hot flashes, not horribly. I had some night sweats, but where it really hit me, I think, was in my digestive system. And talk about stress. Stress is a big part of how well your digestive system works. And so it really hit me in a lot of different areas of my digestive system. At the same time, so I'm helping new clients and getting back on board. There was so much for me to learn. I ran into the Institute of Functional Medicine for the first time when I was looking something up, and they happened to be having a very intensive 6-day training out here in Pasadena, California. And I went, that's only 60 miles away from me. I need to go. So I went, and at the end of the 6 days, I knew that I had found my tribe and haven't looked back since. I've taken many courses from the Institute of Functional Medicine, and that's how I ended up opening up my practice and how I ended up helping so many men and women. And I have definitely shifted my attention to women because 6 years ago, before the social media and everything took off with perimenopause and menopause, and what got me into that space, moving over into this space, was that I was watching my own women in my clinical practice And I've been working with them for a while, and I knew how they ate. I knew their lifestyle. I knew their gut health. I knew all the things that we're supposed to be doing weren't quite working after a certain while. It's like we're losing some ground here. So there's got to be a piece that I'm missing it that I need to pay attention to. And I used to do the cursory in my intake questionnaire. My my question about hormones was this. Has your libido gone down? That was my question, basically. And because we used to associate menopause with libido, and if that's not a problem, then okay, we're good to go. And a lot of my women would say, yeah, it's gone down, but either I'm not in a relationship or I'm not sexually active, or my partner's no longer interested, which is that's not good either, because there's the physical part of that with hormones. So I would just let it go. If it's like, oh, it's okay. And then I began to realize I started looking around me too, and my contemporaries were operating in life very differently from what I was. They were in a lot more pain. They were in the doctor's offices a lot more. And I thought, I really got to learn about this. Now, this was about 6 years ago. Prior to that, I had gone to a doctor, a naturopathic doctor, and she had put me on hormones. I didn't ask for it. I didn't know to ask for it. And I think, if I remember correctly, really, and I don't even know if she asked me these questions or if I reported this to her, I have no idea. But really, the biggest problem that I was having was some incontinence. That was really bugging, the urgency incontinence. That was really bugging me. And I know that my sexual response wasn't nearly as good, and that was bothering me. I doubt very much if I shared that with her, though, at that point in time. But anyway, she put me on a very low dose of hormone therapy, which is what was being used at the time, if you were even lucky to be put on it. And it was the estrogen, which is at that time it was 80% estriol and 20% estradiol. And estriol is very, very weak form of estrogen. So it was a very small dose, but at the same time, I think it made a big difference. And from then up until about 4 or 5 years ago, when I did change the type of hormones that I take and the amount of the hormones that I take as well, as I was learning more and more. So that's how I got into this space of functional medicine and HRT. And I just want to say this too, because we're talking about both of those, is what I'm seeing so much on social media and even from menopause specialists is that we're still siloing the body way too much. And I say that because HRT is not a panacea, just like no medication is a panacea. It might be part of the whole picture, but we still have to look at the whole body. We still have to do really, really good lab work to see what's happening with the thyroid, what's happening with inflammation, all of these things. And I don't think that's happening enough.
So I love with functional medicine that you're looking at your body overall. And so
Mhm.
I'm really interested in finding more about the gut health and hormones.
Okay.
So did
Okay.
once you started taking hormones, did your gut health balance out, or was there other things that you needed to do?
Yes and no. Okay. So I'm going to start with this and then I will share my journey because I think it will relate to a lot of women. So the first thing that we need to understand is estrogen is not just about hot flashes and night sweats and not being able to sleep and all that. Estrogen affects every single organ and tissue in our bodies, and that includes the digestive system. So I was basically without hormones for 7 years. And during those 7 years, I was able to work on my digestive system and to get it to, I would say, 85%. Okay. Keep it there. And then I realized something actually after I started HRT, mainly because probably it was such a low dose, it really didn't improve my digestion necessarily, or I wasn't aware of it. I didn't connect the dots. But I found something else. So I want to talk about that progression. So the interesting thing is I just revamped, I was working on a presentation right before we got on this call, this podcast, because I'm giving you a presentation on hormones, menopause, and digestion. We have different parts of the digestive system. We have our mouth, we have our stomach, we have our small intestine, and the large intestine. And then we have three different organs that help with it. Your liver for bile, we have the gallbladder, it stores the bile, and then the pancreas. Basically, those are the auxiliary organs there. And they all need to be working. And estrogen can affect every single area of that body. And I do want to correlate all of this, not only to estrogen, but to stress. And estrogen does affect stress as well, how we're able to handle it. It's not just progesterone. I think we think of progesterone because it's our calming hormone, but estrogen also plays a big role in that, and not only with depression, with anxiety as well. And when that starts to drop, our ability to handle the things that we used to handle just starts to kind of go away. And we have to respect that. And that's when we'll start seeing more autoimmune disease come up. We'll either it'll heighten more or it'll kick in for the first time. That's when we'll see if your weak spot is your digestive system, you're going to see more things happen there. So what happened with me? I mean, my level of stress during that time was astronomical. And what happened is I stopped making stomach acid basically. So it was the stress and the lack of estrogen combined that contributed to that. Now, why is that important? Stomach acid is super important because if we don't have it, we can't break our food down. We can't absorb our B vitamins. Our minerals aren't available to us. We're bloated. The whole digestive chain is just slow down. And if anyone has experienced this, I ask people, and they say, well, I'm bloated all the time. So I ask them their pattern of bloating. If they bloat right after a meal, probably they don't have enough stomach acid. It's not the end all be all, but that's where I go with that. And you can buy stomach acid off of the shelf, and that can help you until you repair the mucus lining. And then we have to think about it. If you think about estrogen, estrogen is part of collagen, part of our tissue. So if that goes away, we have collagen, the sphincter between our esophagus and our stomach, between the stomach and the small intestine, between the small intestine and our large intestine. Those sphincters need to be working well in order for our bodies to be, our digestion to be working well. And collagen's a part of that. Collagen is a part of that mucus lining in the stomach that will produce that HCl, that stomach acid. So again, it can play a role here. So we have stress and then we have a drop of the hormones as well. Just to put this in perspective for some people, I could take 10 HCl, betaine HCl pills at a meal and not get heartburn. You should not be able to do that. Okay. It just showed me that I was not making any stomach acid. So I had to do that repair. And I actually did that repair pretty well without the estrogen part of it. I had to do quite a few different things. And then the other thing that HCl does is that it sterilizes our food. Is that important? Heck yeah, it's important. Because if we're not sterilizing our food, we can get little buggies coming into that small intestine. And that can be one of the underlying factors for something called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where bacteria should be mainly in our large intestine. And if it migrates up to the small intestine, we're in trouble because every time we eat, we're feeding those bacteria and they will emit either a methane or hydrogen gas, and we are bloated and we don't feel good. And all of a sudden, we have all these food sensitivities, we have all this inflammation, and we think we're allergic to all these foods, and we aren't. It's just our body is responding to what's going on. And we have all this inflammation. This is another thing that can happen is the tight junctions in between our cells in the small intestine can start to separate a little bit because of that inflammation and because we have low estrogen too, because here again, the integrity of the tissue and the cells. So those start to separate a little bit and maybe little tiny minute microscopic pieces of food get out. What is our body going to do? It's going to recognize it as a foreign invader. And so we have all of a sudden all these food allergies, and we start eliminating food, right? Because we either do a food allergy test, or we go, oh, I feel horrible, and I'm going to go on a FODMAP diet. All right. Now, I'm not saying these are horrible, but they were never meant to be on these for a long period of time because we are taking out foods that are good for us. All right. So eliminating all these foods is not going to take care of the problem. So again, that stress part and the estrogen part, it's really big and huge in not only stomach acid, but it's big and huge when we're talking about what's happening in the small intestine. That's where more digestion is happening. And that's where all our absorption of our nutrients is happening. So if we are not in good shape there, we probably are going to be having nutrient deficiencies. So when I see somebody with, let's say, iron deficiency and they're no longer menstruating, and maybe they do eat meat or things like that, we really shouldn't see a really low ferritin or iron levels. I'm going to go, what's happening with the gut? If I see high C-reactive protein, and this is where labs I think are really important, which is a marker of inflammation, doesn't tell us where it's coming from, I always suspect the gut. So there are indications of things that are happening in the gut, even if it's not obvious. Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's very obvious and it's very, very uncomfortable. The other thing that's happening in the small intestine is we make bile in the liver. And one of the purposes of bile is to grab our toxins, combine with toxins in our liver and our hormone metabolites, and then it attaches to the bile, it's taken to the gallbladder, and then the gallbladder empties it into the top of the small intestine. So that's one of the functions of bile, and bile is really important here, okay? And then another function of bile is also to sterilize our food again. It's part of motility, which is super important. It's also part of digesting our fats and making our fat soluble vitamins available to us. And I'm going to tie that in with estrogen big time here. Bile, one of the backbones of bile is choline. And estrogen is part of our body's ability to make that choline. Now, we can get choline from food, but our body makes it as well, and it combines and makes phosphatidylcholine and then makes bile. It also combines with acetylcholine for our brain. So we need choline for a lot of different functions in our body, brain, and as far as the making the bile is concerned. And if our estrogen drops, some women are really going to feel it. I'm one of them. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was 50, around 50, and I'd already been on my hormone replacement for about a year, but again, it was a low dose. I'm like, what is happening here? My skin around my nail beds were cracking and bleeding. And I'm like, okay, I can't do dishes anymore, folks. You guys have got to take over because I can't do them. It hurts. But my heels were cracking and bleeding and they were painful. And then I was living by the ocean at the time and I would go in the ocean and you know how sometimes salt water can be stingy if you just shaven, right? So I would purposely not shave when I was going in the ocean because it got to the point where it would just kill me to go into that salt water. I'm going, what the heck is happening here? And I was still suffering a little bit with constipation here and there. My digestive system wasn't perfect. It was pretty good, but it wasn't perfect. And so I thought, dry skin, Thinking of other things I thought could be thyroid. So I did a full thyroid panel just to rule that out. Everything came back looking good. And I thought, what the heck is it? And then I happened to stumble across a, I don't know if it was a webinar or social media post by Dr. Ben Lynch. Do you know Dr. Ben Lynch?
Mm.
He's really, I would say he's probably the genetics guru. That's what he does. He has a supplement line as well, but he has written a book called Dirty Genes, and he's very bright. He's brilliant. And I happened to hear about this thing about bile and choline and estrogen and the PEMT gene. And I went, all right, I had my genetics done 2 or 3 years ago. And I ran it through his strategene thing. Couldn't make sense of 70% of it, but I had it and I looked through it and I went, oh my gosh, I am homozygous, another PEMT gene, which means I have from both sides, both parents. So I am definitely compromised in my ability to make choline and phosphatidylcholine. So I started to take the supplement that he makes, as a matter of fact, and it made all the difference in the world with my skin, with my cracked heels, and with my digestive system. So if you don't know you have this gene and you're losing your estrogen, and all of a sudden you probably not all of a sudden, because probably you've had dealings with your digestive system kind of your whole life, right? It's just going to get worse when that happens. And so many women don't realize that. About 4 years ago, after I'd done a fair amount of research about hormones, I switched my hormone protocol. I no longer in the bias. I increased the amount of estradiol by quite a bit, and I realized where I am happiest with that. And you would think because I increased my hormones that maybe I wouldn't need that support, that supplement support. I still do. I probably always will to the end of time. And I thought about it. I thought, why didn't I see much difference? And I think probably because even though I increased my estrogen, there's a very small group of doctors that think that bringing your estrogen up to where it was when we were in our fertile years is where you want to be. That's not where I am. So the amount of estrogen I have that I'm taking is not going to get me up to that amount. And I was still having problems even then when I was fertile with constipation and things like that. And you might think, do I need to have a genetic test to determine if I have the PEMT gene? Well, not necessarily. If you want to know, you can. But if you take a good intake, and that's something that functional medicine practitioners should do, or all doctors should do, but they don't. If you take a good intake and good history, you'll get, oh, my mom had her gallbladder removed, right? That's choline, that's bio. Some members of my family get dandruff and really dry skin. That's not me. Some other members of my family, when they eat a fatty meal, they will have to go to the bathroom very quickly. All right, so they have the opposite effect of the constipation. What are some other things that gallbladder issues? More dandruff where we're not absorbing our fats or fat soluble vitamins and things like that. Just some distress in the stomach area when we eat certain foods, especially fatty foods. Again, these are all things pointing to that you probably have an issue with bile and perhaps gallbladder. So, yes, menopause can really affect a woman's digestive system. And again, her genetics is going to play a part in it. I would say that who have had more problems historically are probably going to have more problems going into this. Some women who've never had problems are going to have problems for the first time. So it's something that's really good for us to be aware of. Really, with estrogen, when it comes to digestion, we have two parts of it. One is the three, four, yeah, a lot, right? One is the tissue integrity, the sphincter integrity, the ability to make bile, the ability to make stomach acid, motility, keeping down inflammation, keeping our junctures tight. So we have all that. And then when we lose it again, we have that whole stress part of it and stress response that becomes much more heightened when we lose our estrogen and progesterone. So yeah, it's not fair, ladies. It really isn't. And we get hit from both ways. And the more I work, the longer I see clients, I'm really paying attention to two things just in the last year or so, and that's that vagus nerve and how it affects our digestion. It is huge. And also our lymphatic system and how we can get so congested, and that can be congestion around that whole pelvic region, which can also affect our digestion and our ability to move things through and just the blood flow and everything else. So it ain't easy and it's multifaceted. Yeah,
Well, and the problem is there's not a lot of knowledge on this. I know
there
for
isn't.
myself, I've been looking, and it's funny because just I think last week I was looking up lack of stomach acid of all things.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden I'm talking about it today, and there's very little on it.
yeah.
And so for someone that's listening that is having gut issues and that is over 50, what are some of the things that practical steps that they can take right now?
The first thing would be to get with a knowledgeable practitioner because the digestive system can be pretty tricky. And sometimes when things I get flares, I will, I know this stuff, right? And so I'll give you an example. Last year, I don't know what happened to me, but my digestive system really was a mess in a different way for probably 6 to 8 months. And I'm like, okay, Cindy, you've done that, 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 that. And
Now what?
you're now what? And that's when I said, okay, Cindy, guess what you got to do? You got to break down and you have to do a functional stool test so you can see what the F is going on here because you're not getting at it and you've used everything almost. I did one more thing and it seemed to work. So I like to say when it comes to digestion, there's a few things you can do. Comes to digestion, I think you're going to be saving more time and more money if you actually pay for a good functional stool test. And the two that I would recommend is either the GI maps or the one I use, I can't think of right now, the GI effects by Genova Labs. So I use Genova Labs, I use the GI effects. Now you can only order those from a practitioner. You can't just go online and order them. Now they do have practitioners, if you go to their sites, they will give you a name of a practitioner that you can contact and get it from them. And then once you have that stool test, then you have to have someone who can do a really good job of interpreting them. And I have run into, unfortunately, integrative doctors and even functional doctors that don't know how to read them properly and don't really give their clients or patients a really good plan. So if you can, I would test. Okay. Now, having said that, let's say that maybe it's just that you need some enzymes. You need some a good probiotic, some enzymes, and if that doesn't work, try betaine HCl, your stomach acid. And if you're going to do that, this is what I would recommend that you do as far as the HCl. And maybe you've already run into this in your search here, but you can do a test. And it's where we take one HCl pill, usually they're 500 milligrams, with a meal. You want to take it right before the meal or maybe middle of the meal, not afterwards, because that HCl is going to sit on top of what you just ate. And sometimes you're going to have acid reflux feeling and it doesn't feel very good. So you would start with one. The next meal you're going to put in two. So we're going to slowly titrate up to see what your tolerance level is. The next meal it's going to be three. Now, the bigger the meal you eat, the more HCl you need, right? So you're going to keep on going. I would say maybe go up to six, or if you really want to do what I did, I went up to 10. Just okay, let's just keep on going to see what my tolerance is. And I could do 10 and I still didn't get any heartburning. And so see what your tolerance level is and see if it's helping, right? Is it
Yeah.
helping with the bloating? Is it helping with your stools? Is it helping with constipation? Because if we get stopped up here, everything else gets slowed down. Is it helping with your farts, your smelly, stinky farts? Because if things get packed up anywhere, it can be embarrassing, right? I've experienced it all, right? It's not fun. So you can start there. If you do have bloating right after you eat, if you do have belching, or if you eat meat and it seems to just, or a meal, it just seems to just sit there, that means you don't have the tools that you need in order to break things down. So, yeah, a good probiotic, maybe some digestive enzymes, maybe some HCl. Start there. If that
Okay.
helps, you're good to go. If it doesn't help, we got to go to the next layer, right? And
Yeah.
the other thing, I always recommend to my clients to take out dairy, to take out gluten, sometimes eggs, sometimes soy, just for maybe a week or two to see if that makes a difference too. And then maybe put one of them back in, see how you do, maybe the other one back in, see how you do. So there can be foods too, but sometimes we're going down a rabbit hole with that. So you want to remove things that are irritants, and sometimes fiber for people is a big irritant. And if you find that is the case, there's a chance you might have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. It's a really good chance of that.
Okay.
So there's indications. Yeah,
Awesome. So I understand you have a lab checklist for the pause years available.
I do.
Can you talk about that quickly?
Yes, I would love to talk about that quickly. So, what I put together is a checklist of what I feel is really important for all women, perimenopause and menopause, and even before that, but especially should be asking for from their doctors and why and how to ask for it. And here again, I kind of mentioned in the very beginning where HRT is the icing on the cake. And I'm glad doctors are beginning to give HRT to women in perimenopause, but where I push back is they're giving it to them without seeing the whole picture. They're not giving a thorough thyroid panel, which is a minimum of 6 markers for thyroid. It's not just TSH, it's not just free T4. There's 6 markers to really see what's going on. We're not looking at iron status. We're not looking at ferritin status. We're not looking at vitamin D. They're not looking at C-reactive protein. They're not looking at insulin levels. So seeing if there is some insulin resistance going on here. So there's so much that's missed. So that is what that is for. And I think I sent a link for that and it's free. And I hope that your listeners will take advantage of it and I hope it's helpful. But yeah, and to me, good lab work is low-hanging fruit because most of the time we can get our doctors to do probably 80% if you know how to ask for it and maybe talk about it. And I just saw something on Instagram this morning, segue, it's a side thing, but it is happening, is that women are lying to their doctors. They're telling their doctors that, yeah, there is thyroid disease in my family or Hashimoto's in my family. There is osteoporosis in my family, even if there isn't. I've never had cancer if they want to get hormones. It's like, are we really reduced to not being honest with our doctors because we're not able to get what we want to get just being honest with them? And it's a really sad state of affairs, but it's happening all over the place.
Yeah,
So
scary. Yeah.
it is scary, isn't it? I'm hoping that doctors will hear it. It's you are holding the purse strings so tightly that your patients aren't being honest with you. And so it's actually detrimental to you. You can't help your patients, and I honestly think they want to. And your patients are not going to get the care that they need.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this up now. So, Cindy, what are your final words of wisdom today?
My final words of wisdom is be patient with yourselves, be patient with your bodies, stay curious. It is up to us to become our own advocates and to find at least one or two people, professionals who can help us down this last 4 to 5 decades of our lives so that we can move through it with vitality and feeling really good and doing the things that we want to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time here today, Sydney. Amazing information. And yeah, just leaving you all a reminder to slow down and enjoy
Yeah.
life. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening today. If this episode gave you something, there's more waiting for you inside the Relaxation Lounge. The tools, the community, the support, all in one place. Come and exhale with us. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to www.therelaxationlounge.info, and we'll see you in the lounge.